I'm Eleanor Wilson, 65 years old, and I never thought my own son would steal from me. For 4 years, I saved every penny for a knee replacement surgery I desperately needed. Working double shifts despite excruciating pain, I finally had the $32,000 for the procedure. Then one morning, I discovered my son Brian had emptied my account to take his in-laws on a luxury vacation to the Maldives. What happened next changed our relationship forever. If you've ever had family take advantage of your kindness, drop a comment about where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear how I stood up for myself after a lifetime of putting others first. Tuesday mornings were usually quiet in my small ranch house on the outskirts of Scottsdale. I'd wake up at 6, make my coffee, and check my email and bank accounts before starting my day. That particular Tuesday in April began like any other, until I logged into my savings account and felt my heart stop. The balance that should have read $32,483.76 now showed only $3,983.76. That can't be right, I whispered to myself, clicking refresh repeatedly as if that would magically restore my money. My hands began to shake so badly I had to set my coffee mug down before I spilled it everywhere. $28,500. Gone. My first thought was that my account had been hacked. Who would steal that much money from a retirement-age woman? I immediately called the bank's customer service line, navigating through the automated system with growing frustration until I finally reached a human being. Good morning. This is Melanie with First National. How can I help you today? The cheerful voice on the other end had no idea of the panic coursing through me. My account has been compromised, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Someone's taken almost $30,000 from my savings. After verifying my identity, Melanie pulled up my account information. Mrs. Wilson, I'm showing a transfer of $28,500 to an account under Brian Wilson's name. This transaction was authorized by you 3 days ago on Saturday. That's not possible, I insisted. I never authorized any transfer to my son. The transfer was initiated through online banking using your credentials and approved with your authentication code sent to your phone, Melanie explained patiently. Is there any chance a family member might have access to your accounts or phone? The question hit me like a ton of bricks. Brian had been at my house for Sunday dinner just last weekend. He'd asked to use my phone to look up a recipe while I was preparing dessert. Could he have accessed my banking app then? He knew my birthday, which I shamefully used as my PIN for almost everything. I need to call you back, I told Melanie, ending the call. I immediately dialed Brian's number. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I sent a text asking him to call me urgently. Then I called his work, only to be told by his assistant that he had taken the week off for a family emergency. Family emergency? What family emergency? Throughout the day, I tried reaching Brian repeatedly. My texts grew increasingly desperate. Brian, please call me. Brian, there's a problem with my bank account. Brian, I'm worried. Please call me back. Finally, around 4 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from him. Hey Mom, taking care of something important. We'll call you later this week. Love you. That casual response made my stomach clench. Taking care of something important? With my surgery money? I called my daughter Heather next. Unlike her brother, she picked up on the second ring. Mom? Everything okay? You never call during work hours. Heather, do you know where your brother is? Have you spoken to him recently? There was a pause, too long to be innocent. Why do you ask? Heather, I said firmly, I need to know where Brian is. It's important. Another pause. Mom, I promised I wouldn't say anything, but Brian and Rebecca took her parents to the Maldives for their 30th anniversary. It was supposed to be a surprise. I had to sit down, my bad knee buckling beneath me. The Maldives? When did they leave? They're leaving tomorrow morning. Mom, what's going on? You sound upset. He took my surgery money, Heather. $28,000 from my savings account. That's what's going on. What? No, that can't be right. Brian wouldn't do that. The shock in her voice sounded genuine. Maybe there's some misunderstanding. The bank confirmed he transferred the money to his account 3 days ago. Somehow he got into my banking app. Oh my God, Heather whispered. I knew they couldn't afford a trip like that. Rebecca's been posting about their preparations on Instagram, and I wondered how they were paying for it all. What exactly has she been posting? I asked, a new wave of anger washing over me. Private villa over the water, first-class tickets for 6 people, some fancy dinner package. She's been bragging about how Brian is surprising her parents with the trip of a lifetime. 6 people. Brian, Rebecca, her parents, and probably their 2 teenage kids. All going to the Maldives on my surgery money. Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. What are you going to do? What indeed? The betrayal cut so deep I could barely think straight. My own son had stolen the money I'd been saving for years. Money I needed for a surgery that would allow me to walk without pain again. And for what? To impress his in-laws with an extravagant vacation? I'm going to talk to him, I said finally. Tonight. Despite my knee screaming in protest, I drove the 20 minutes to Brian and Rebecca's suburban home. The pain shooting up my leg with every press of the gas pedal only fueled my determination. The sun was setting by the time I pulled into their driveway, casting long shadows across their perfectly manicured lawn and 2-story house. I noticed the porch lights weren't on yet, but Rebecca's white SUV was parked outside. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead, and made my way to the front door. Rebecca answered after the 3rd knock, surprise evident on her face. Eleanor, we weren't expecting you. She was wearing expensive-looking loungewear, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun that probably took 20 minutes to arrange. I need to speak with Brian, I said, not bothering with pleasantries. He's not home yet, Rebecca replied, reluctantly stepping aside to let me in. He should be back soon. He's picking up some last-minute things for our trip. Their living room was filled with open suitcases and piles of resort wear. A stack of brand-new snorkeling equipment sat by the door. Nice gear, I commented, nodding toward the expensive items. Must have cost a fortune. Rebecca smiled proudly. Brian says we deserve the best. We've been planning this surprise for my parents for months. They've never been anywhere exotic. How thoughtful, I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. And how are you affording all this? Last I heard, Brian mentioned budget concerns when I suggested you all join me for a weekend in San Diego this summer. Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. Brian's been doing really well at work. He got a bonus. A bonus of $28,500? Her perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together in confusion. What? No, I don't think it was that much. Because that's exactly how much disappeared from my surgery fund yesterday. Rebecca's face went pale. Your surgery fund? I don't understand. Before she could say more, we heard the garage door opening. Brian was home. Rebecca and I stood in uncomfortable silence until he walked in, carrying shopping bags from high-end stores. He froze when he saw me. Mom, he said, his voice tight. What are you doing here? Where's my money, Brian? He set down the bags carefully as if buying time. Can we talk about this privately? He glanced meaningfully at Rebecca. No, I said firmly. Rebecca should hear this too. I want to know why you stole $28,000 from my surgery fund. Rebecca gasped, looking between us. Brian, what is she talking about? Brian's face hardened. I didn't steal anything. I'm just taking what would have come to me eventually anyway. What does that mean? I asked, incredulous. It means it's basically an early inheritance, he said, as if this explanation made perfect sense. You're always saying you want to help us while you're still alive to see it. An inheritance? That money was for my knee replacement surgery. I've been saving for 4 years, working extra shifts at the library despite being in constant pain. You knew that. Brian shrugged, avoiding eye contact. You can save up again. Or use Medicare. I needed it more right now. Needed it? For a luxury vacation. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. It's not just a vacation, Brian shot back. It's an investment in my relationship with Rebecca's family. Her dad has connections that could help my career. Rebecca looked increasingly uncomfortable. Brian, you told me we could afford this trip. You said you'd been saving. We can afford it, Brian insisted. Mom just doesn't understand. She's always favored Heather anyway. Remember how she paid for Heather's grad school but told me to take out loans? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's not true and you know it. Heather got scholarships. And this isn't about her. This is about you stealing my money. I'll pay you back eventually, Brian said dismissively. When I get the promotion I'm up for. Rebecca's dad could put in a good word. So that's what this trip is really about? Bribing your father-in-law with a vacation bought with stolen money. Just then the doorbell rang. Rebecca hurried to answer it, clearly relieved for the interruption. Mom! Dad! You're early! She exclaimed with forced cheerfulness. My heart sank as Gerald and Diane Matthews stepped into the house, beaming with excitement. They were dressed for travel in comfortable but expensive-looking clothes, wheeling brand-new luggage behind them. We couldn't wait another minute. Diane said, hugging her daughter. This is the most wonderful surprise. We've never been anywhere like the Maldives. Gerald spotted me and smiled warmly. Eleanor. How nice to see you. Are you joining us for dinner before we leave tomorrow? I stood there mortified. Gerald and Diane clearly had no idea their dream vacation was being funded by their son-in-law's theft. No, I was just leaving, I managed to say. Brian quickly moved to my side, gripping my arm too tightly and steering me toward the door. Mom was just dropping off some travel tips, he said smoothly. She's quite the world traveler. Once we were on the porch out of earshot, his demeanor changed completely. Don't you dare ruin this, he hissed. Gerald and Diane think I'm successful enough to afford this trip. If they find out the truth, I'll never have a chance at that promotion. So I'm supposed to just let you steal my surgery money? Money I need to be able to walk without pain. I told you I'll pay you back. Just give me time. How much time, Brian? My surgery was scheduled for next month. I've been on the waiting list for over a year. He had the audacity to roll his eyes. Just reschedule it. It's not like you're dying. I stared at my son, this person I'd raised, suddenly feeling like I didn't know him at all. You need to return my money. Now. Not happening, he said coldly. The trip is paid for, non-refundable. Just go home, Mom. We'll talk when I get back. With that he went back inside, shutting the door in my face. I stood there for a moment, tears welling in my eyes, before limping back to my car. The drive home was a blur through my tears. How had I raised a son who could be so callous, so entitled? Where had I gone wrong? That night was one of the longest of my life. Sleep evaded me completely as I tossed and turned, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and my knee throbbing in time with my heartbeat. The bedside clock taunted me, its red digits marking each passing hour of my sleepless night. 11:42, 1:15, 3:27. In the darkness of my bedroom, memories flooded back. Brian as a toddler, his chubby hand in mine as we crossed the street. Brian at 8, proudly showing me the A on his science project. Brian at 12, sobbing in my arms after his father moved across the country with his new family and gradually stopped calling. I remembered the lean years after the divorce, when I worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. The time Brian needed braces, and I sold my grandmother's silver to pay for them. The Christmas when Heather asked for a bike, and I picked up night shifts at the local diner for 6 weeks to afford it. The countless times I worn secondhand clothes so my children could have new ones. Where did I go wrong? I whispered to the darkness. At 4:15 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and moved to the living room with a cup of tea. My photo album sat on the bookshelf, and I pulled one down, turning to pictures of Brian's high school graduation. There he was, beaming in his cap and gown, his arm around my shoulders. I'd been so proud that day. Despite everything, both my children had turned out well, or so I thought. Had I somehow taught Brian that he was entitled to take what wasn't his? Had my sacrifices over the years given him the impression that my needs would always come second to his? At 6:30 a.m., I called my sister Martha, knowing she'd be up getting ready for work. "He did what?" she exclaimed after I explained the situation. "Eleanor, that's theft, plain and simple. You need to call the police." "I can't report my own son," I said, the very thought making me ill. "Then call the bank again. See if they can reverse the transfer or freeze the accounts. You can't let him get away with this." "But what about the trip? His in-laws are so excited." Listen to yourself. Martha interrupted. Your son stole your surgery money, and you're worried about ruining his in-laws' vacation? When are you going to put yourself first for once? Her words stung because they contained a truth I'd been avoiding for decades. I had always put my children's needs above my own, to my own detriment. After talking with Martha, I called Dr. Kapoor, who had been treating my knee for years. Mrs. Wilson, he said gravely after I explained the situation, delaying this surgery further is not advisable. The deterioration in your joint has accelerated in the past year. Without intervention soon, you risk permanent mobility issues that even surgery may not fully correct. His words sent a chill through me. I'd been living with the pain for so long, pushing through it day after day, that I sometimes forgot there could be consequences beyond the constant discomfort. How long can I safely postpone? I asked. Medically speaking, I wouldn't recommend waiting more than another 3 months. And that's assuming you can manage the pain and inflammation with your current regimen. 3 months. Even if Brian intended to repay me eventually, could I trust that it would be within that time frame? At noon I called my best friend Ruth, who had gone through something similar with her nephew a few years back. He's counting on your love for him, Ruth said wisely. He knows you've always bailed him out in the past, always put his needs first. He doesn't believe there will be real consequences. But what if I damage our relationship permanently? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. Eleanor, honey, he damaged the relationship when he stole from you. And enabling this behavior isn't helping him become a better person. Sometimes love means setting boundaries, even when it's hard. As the day wore on, my resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about the money, though that was certainly important. It was about teaching my adult son that actions have consequences, that he couldn't take advantage of my love for him. By evening, I had made my decision. I would contact the bank again and explore my options for recovering my money. If that meant disrupting the lavish vacation Brian had planned, so be it. My health and well-being mattered too. For perhaps the first time in my life, I was putting on my own oxygen mask first. At 6 a.m. the next morning, I was already on the phone with First National's fraud department. My sleepless night had given way to clarity and determination. Good morning, Fraud Prevention. This is Thomas speaking. How may I assist you today? My name is Eleanor Wilson. I began, my voice steadier than I expected. Yesterday I reported an unauthorized transfer from my account, and I'd like to follow up on that. Thomas pulled up my information and reviewed the notes from my previous call. Yes, Mrs. Wilson, I see the report here. You're claiming that a transfer of $28,500 to Brian Wilson's account was made without your authorization, correct? That's right. My son accessed my account without my permission and transferred my surgery fund to his account. And you're certain you didn't authorize this transfer? The system shows it was authenticated using your credentials and the verification code sent to your mobile device. I explained how Brian had likely accessed my phone during Sunday dinner, how he knew my PIN was my birthday, and how I would never have willingly transferred my surgery fund to him. I understand, Mrs. Wilson. Since this involves a family member with account access, this falls under what we call friendly fraud. It's more complicated than typical unauthorized access, but we do have options. Thomas explained that the bank could temporarily freeze the associated accounts while they investigated the unauthorized transfer. This would prevent any further transactions until the matter was resolved. Would that include his credit cards if they're linked to the account that received my money? I asked. Yes, if the cards draw from the account in question, they would be temporarily suspended during the investigation. I closed my eyes, imagining the scene that would unfold at the airport if I went through with this. Brian, Rebecca, her parents, their children, all dressed for their dream vacation, suddenly unable to pay for anything. The confusion, the embarrassment, the anger. But then I thought of my knee, of the years of pain I'd endured while saving for this surgery. I thought of Dr. Kapoor's warning about permanent mobility issues. I thought of Brian's dismissive "it's not like you're dying," and his empty promise to pay me back eventually. I'd like to proceed with freezing the accounts, I said firmly. Thomas walked me through the process, explaining that I would need to sign an affidavit claiming the transfer was unauthorized. He also warned me that this was only a temporary measure. If I wanted to permanently recover the funds, I might need to pursue legal action. How quickly will the accounts be frozen? I asked. The freeze will be applied immediately upon completion of this call, Thomas assured me. Any pending transactions or attempts to use associated cards will be declined. After completing the necessary verification steps and verbally signing the affidavit, Thomas confirmed that the process was underway. Is there anything else I can assist you with today, Mrs. Wilson? Actually, yes. Do you know what time the morning flights leave for the Maldives? Thomas seemed taken aback by the question, but politely informed me he wouldn't have access to that information. After thanking him and ending the call, I turned to my computer and searched for flights from Phoenix to the Maldives. There was only one morning option, a 9:30 a.m. departure connecting through Los Angeles and Dubai. It was currently 7:15 a.m. If Brian and his group were on that flight, they would be at the airport now, probably checking in and going through security. I sat by my phone, a strange calm settling over me. What was done was done. Now I just had to wait. At 8:22 a.m., my phone rang. It was Heather. Mom, what did you do? She demanded without preamble. Brian just called me in a panic saying his cards aren't working. I froze the accounts connected to my stolen money, I replied evenly. Mom, they're at the airport. Rebecca's parents are there. This is humiliating for everyone. More humiliating than having your surgery funds stolen by your own son? Heather sighed. I know what Brian did was wrong. Believe me, I tore into him when I found out. But couldn't this have waited until they got back? Now Rebecca's parents are caught in the middle of this. Brian put them in the middle when he used my money to fund their vacation. But they didn't know that. They're innocent in all this. I felt a twinge of guilt but pushed it aside. I'm sorry they're caught up in this, but Brian gave me no choice. He refused to return my money and dismissed my concerns completely. So what happens now? Heather asked. Now Brian faces the consequences of his actions. Maybe for the first time in his life. 8:37 a.m., the first text from Brian arrived. What did you do? My cards aren't working. I didn't respond. 8:42 a.m. Mom, this isn't funny. We're trying to check our bags and my card keeps getting declined. 8:47 a.m. Answer your phone. This is serious. I watched the missed call notifications pile up, but couldn't bring myself to answer. What would I say? That I was sorry? I wasn't. That I would fix it? I wouldn't. 8:55 a.m. You're ruining everything. Gerald and Diane are asking questions I can't answer. Call me now. The texts grew increasingly desperate and angry as the minutes ticked by. By 9:15 a.m., they had turned into outright threats. If you don't fix this right now, don't expect to hear from me again. Ever. I sat with my phone in my hand, tears streaming down my face, but my resolve didn't waver. For once, Brian would have to face the reality that he couldn't take from me without consequences. At 9:22 a.m., my phone erupted with an incoming call from Brian. After watching it ring several times, I finally answered. How could you do this to me? Brian's voice was a furious hiss, like he was trying not to be overheard. We're standing at the gate, and none of my cards are working. The airline won't let us board without payment confirmation. I'm sorry it came to this, Brian, I said calmly, though my heart was racing. But you left me no choice. No choice? You could have waited until we got back. Now we're stranded at the airport with Rebecca's parents looking at me like I'm some kind of failure. You stole my surgery money, Brian. What did you expect would happen? I told you I'd pay you back, he shouted, abandoning his attempt to keep his voice down. When? You gave me no timeline, no plan. Just an empty promise while dismissing the surgery I've been waiting over a year for. So this is your revenge? Humiliating me in front of my in-laws? Making me look like I can't provide for my family. This isn't revenge, Brian. It's consequences. The bank is investigating the unauthorized transfer from my account. There was a moment of silence before Brian's voice returned, now icy and controlled. You've made a huge mistake. I'm your son, your family, and you choose money over me? That's not fair, I said, my voice finally breaking. You're the one who chose a luxury vacation over your mother's health. Whatever helps you sleep at night, he spat. Don't expect to hear from us when we get back. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a mother anymore." The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my phone in shock. Despite knowing I was in the right, his words cut deep. Before I could process what had happened, my phone rang again. This time it was Rebecca. "Eleanor," she said, her voice thick with tears. "What's going on? Brian won't explain anything, and we're about to miss our flight." "I'm sorry you're caught in this, Rebecca, but Brian took my surgery fund without permission to pay for this trip. I had to take action to get my money back." "Your surgery fund?" She sounded genuinely confused. "But Brian said he'd been saving for this trip for months. He said it was his bonus money." "He lied to you," I said gently. "He transferred the money from my account 3 days ago." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "I had no idea," she finally said. "But Eleanor, my parents are here. They're so excited about this trip. Couldn't this have waited?" "I wish it could have, but Brian gave me no choice. He refused to return the money and told me to just reschedule my surgery." Another call beeped in while I was talking to Rebecca. It was Gerald, Rebecca's father. "I need to take this," I told Rebecca. "It's your dad." I switched calls, bracing myself. "Hello, Gerald." "Eleanor, what in the world is happening?" Gerald's usually jovial voice was tense. "We're at the gate, and suddenly none of Brian's cards are working. He's not making any sense, and Rebecca is in tears." I took a deep breath and told Gerald the truth, that Brian had taken my surgery fund without permission to pay for their trip, that I'd reported it to the bank, and that the accounts had been frozen as part of the investigation. There was a long silence on the other end. "I see," Gerald finally said, his voice grave. "I had no idea. Brian presented this trip as something he'd been planning and saving for. He never mentioned anything about using your money. I'm truly sorry you're all caught in the middle of this, Gerald. I never wanted to ruin your anniversary celebration. Don't apologize, Eleanor. If what you're saying is true, and I have no reason to doubt you, then Brian is the one who should be apologizing." Gerald sighed heavily. What a mess. After I hung up with Gerald, I received a call from Diane. Unlike her husband, she was furious. "How could you do this at the last minute? We're standing at the gate, bags checked, ready to board. If you had an issue with Brian, you should have resolved it privately, not dragged us into it." I tried to explain, but Diane wasn't interested in listening. "I don't care what he did. There's a time and place to address family problems, and it's not when we're about to board an international flight." At 9:43 a.m., my phone rang again. It was Brian, and this time he was beyond furious. "You told Gerald? How dare you air our private family business? Do you have any idea what you've done?" I answered his questions honestly, Brian. "Something you should have tried." "He offered to pay for the whole trip on his own card," Brian said, his voice shaking with rage. "Do you know how humiliating that was? To have my father-in-law bail me out in front of everyone. I imagine it's similar to how I felt when I discovered my son had stolen my surgery fund." I replied evenly. "This isn't over," Brian threatened. "When I get back, you'll regret this. I promise you that." Despite his intimidation tactics, I held firm. "I love you, Brian. I always will. But what you did was wrong, and I won't enable it." "Save your love," he snapped. "I don't want it. Don't call me. Don't text me. We're done." The call ended and I sat in the sudden silence of my living room, emotionally drained but oddly at peace. I had stood my ground. For perhaps the first time in our relationship, I had prioritized my needs over Brian's wants. At 10:05 a.m., I received a final text from Rebecca. "We're boarding now. Gerald paid for everything. Brian isn't speaking to anyone. I'm so sorry about all this. We'll sort it out when we return." I set my phone down and let the tears come. Despite the relief of knowing my money would be returned, the cost had been high. My relationship with my son was severely damaged, perhaps beyond repair. Yet beneath the sadness was a small but growing sense of pride. I had advocated for myself, set a boundary, and held to it despite enormous emotional pressure. The old Eleanor would have capitulated, sacrificed her needs once again for family harmony. But not this time. Not anymore. The week following the airport incident passed in eerie silence. According to their social media posts, Brian, Rebecca, and her parents had made it to the Maldives, staying in the luxurious overwater villas they had planned. The photos showed stunning turquoise waters and beaming smiles, but I couldn't help wondering what tension simmered beneath those carefully curated images. Meanwhile, I was deep in the process of working with the bank to recover my funds. Thomas from the fraud department had been immensely helpful, guiding me through the complexity of the situation. Because your son had access to your phone and knew your PIN, this falls into a gray area legally, he explained during one of our calls. However, the fact that he transferred such a large sum without explicit permission works in your favor. The process was more complicated than I had initially hoped. There were affidavits to sign, statements to provide, and a review process that could take up to 30 days. I tried not to think about Dr. Kapoor's 3-month warning as the days ticked by. On Wednesday, Heather came over for dinner, bringing updates from her limited communication with Brian. "It's really tense over there," she said, helping me set the table. "Rebecca's parents are barely speaking to Brian. They're doing activities separately most days." "Has Brian said anything about me?" I couldn't help asking. Heather hesitated. "He's still very angry, Mom. He feels betrayed." "He feels betrayed?" I echoed incredulously. "What about how I feel?" I know. I'm not defending him. I'm just telling you where his head is at. Rebecca, on the other hand, has been texting me a lot. She's mortified by the whole situation. As she should be, I said, then immediately regretted my harsh tone. "I'm sorry." I know she claims she didn't know where the money came from. I believe her, Heather said. From what she's told me, Brian has a history of financial irregularities that she wasn't fully aware of. What do you mean? Heather looked uncomfortable. It's not my place to share their private business, but let's just say this might not be the first time Brian has been less than honest about money. This new information left me wondering how much I really knew about my son's adult life. Had he developed patterns of behavior I wasn't aware of? Had I been so focused on maintaining peace that I'd ignored warning signs? The next day, I checked Instagram against my better judgment. Rebecca had posted photos of an elegant dinner with her parents, noticeably without Brian. The caption read, "So grateful to Mom and Dad for making this special evening possible. Some things are more important than money." It was a clear jab at Brian, suggesting further discord in paradise. On Friday, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was Gerald Matthews. "Eleanor, I hope I'm not interrupting anything," he said, his voice distant and slightly distorted. "Not at all, Gerald. How is the vacation going?" He sighed heavily. "To be honest, it's not the celebration we envisioned. Diane and I have decided to return home early. We're flying back tomorrow." "I'm so sorry," I said, genuinely remorseful that their anniversary trip had been ruined. "Please don't apologize. None of this is your fault. In fact, I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" I asked, confused. "For opening our eyes to some concerning patterns in Brian's behavior. Since the airport incident, other things have come to light that have us worried about Rebecca's financial security." I didn't know how to respond to that. On one hand, I felt validated that Gerald recognized the seriousness of Brian's actions. On the other hand, it was painful to hear my son's character being questioned, even if justifiably. "What will you do when you return?" I asked. "Diane and I would like to come see you, if that's all right. I think we need to have a conversation about how to move forward from this, as a family." I agreed to meet them, both dreading and welcoming the opportunity to clear the air. The following Monday, my phone chimed with an email notification. It was from Wilson Legal Services, with the subject line "Notice of Representation and Demand." My hands shaking, I opened it to find a formal letter from an attorney claiming to represent Brian. The letter asserted that the $28,500 had been a gift from me to Brian, citing our dinner conversation where I had allegedly expressed a desire to help fund a family bonding experience. It demanded that I cease all defamatory communications with Brian's in-laws and withdraw my fraud claim with the bank immediately, or face potential legal action. I sat staring at my screen in disbelief. Brian was threatening to sue me? The son I had raised alone, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally, was now sending lawyers after me? In tears, I forwarded the email to Martha, who called me instantly. "This is intimidation, pure and simple," she said firmly. "He's trying to scare you into dropping the fraud claim before the bank makes its decision. But what if the bank believes him? What if they decide it was a gift? Then we'll fight it. I'm calling Janet Foster right now." Janet was a friend of Martha's who practiced family law. "You need proper legal representation." The stress of the situation began taking a physical toll. My knee pain, always present, intensified to the point where I could barely walk to the bathroom without my cane. Sleep became elusive again, and my appetite disappeared. When Dr. Kapoor saw me for my regular appointment that Thursday, his concern was evident. "Your blood pressure is much higher than your last visit," he noted, frowning at the numbers. "And you've lost 7 pounds. Is everything all right, Mrs. Wilson?" I broke down then, telling him about the situation with Brian, the delayed surgery, and the legal threats. Dr. Kapoor listened patiently, then made a decision that brought me to tears. "I'm moving your surgery up on the waiting list," he said. "As soon as your funds are restored, we'll get you in. Your condition is deteriorating faster than anticipated, and further delay would be medically inadvisable." His kindness was almost more than I could bear after weeks of conflict and stress. That Saturday, as promised, Gerald and Diane came to visit me. They arrived bearing flowers and a box of pastries from an expensive bakery downtown. "Eleanor," Gerald began once we were seated in my living room. "First, I want to apologize for how Diane reacted at the airport. We were shocked and confused." Diane nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "I was out of line. I didn't understand what was happening, and I lashed out at you instead of addressing the real issue. Which brings us to why we're here," Gerald continued. "After what happened, Rebecca shared some concerns about Brian's financial behavior that she's been noticing for years, but has been afraid to confront. Pattern of spending beyond their means, hidden credit cards, borrowing from friends without telling her. We're worried," Diane added. "Not just about Rebecca and the grandchildren, but about you too. Taking your surgery money is beyond the pale." "We'd like to help," Gerald said firmly. "We can cover your surgery costs until the bank resolves the fraud claim. Consider it an interest-free loan." I was stunned by their generosity. "That's incredibly kind, but I couldn't possibly accept." "Please," Diane insisted. "It would help us feel less complicit in what happened. We had no idea our anniversary trip was being funded by your surgery money. We're horrified by that." After much discussion, I reluctantly agreed to consider their offer if the bank's resolution was delayed much longer. Before they left, Gerald handed me his business card with his personal cell number written on the back. "Call us if you need anything," he said. "And please keep us updated on the situation with the bank. We're in your corner, Eleanor." Their support was unexpected but deeply appreciated. As they drove away, I realized that while this ordeal might have damaged my relationship with Brian, it had created new connections I hadn't anticipated. Perhaps that was the silver lining in this dark cloud that had settled over my life. 3 weeks after the airport incident, I received the call I'd been waiting for. The bank had completed its investigation and had ruled in my favor. The $28,500 would be returned to my account within 3 business days, and Brian's temporary account freeze would be lifted once the transfer was complete. "We found sufficient evidence that the transfer was made without proper authorization," Thomas explained. "The access pattern was unusual, and the text messages between you and your son afterward support your claim that you were unaware of the transfer until after it occurred." Relief washed over me like a wave. "Thank you, Thomas. You've been incredibly helpful through this whole process. I'm glad we could resolve this for you, Mrs. Wilson. I know it hasn't been easy." That was an understatement. The past weeks had been some of the most difficult of my life. Brian had still not spoken to me directly, communicating only through his attorney, who had sent 2 more threatening letters. Janet Foster, the lawyer Martha had connected me with, had handled these communications with professional grace, assuring me that they were largely empty threats. "He has no case," Janet had explained during our consultation. "Even if you had verbally discussed helping with a family experience, which you deny. An oral agreement for such a large sum wouldn't hold up in court without substantial evidence. And the bank's finding will further strengthen your position. With the financial aspect resolved, I immediately called Dr. Kapoor's office to schedule my surgery. To my delight, they had an opening the following week due to a cancellation. It seems the universe is finally working in your favor, Mrs. Wilson, Dr. Kapoor's receptionist said cheerfully. Indeed, it felt like the dark clouds were beginning to part. Except for one storm that still loomed large. My broken relationship with Brian. Despite the legal threats and harsh words, he was still my son, and the estrangement weighed heavily on my heart. Heather came over to help me prepare for the surgery, stocking my refrigerator with easy meals and setting up a recovery area in my living room. Have you heard anything from Brian? I asked as we arranged pillows on the couch. Heather hesitated. He and Rebecca are back from the Maldives. Separately. What do you mean separately? Rebecca and the kids stayed with her parents for a few extra days. Brian came back early alone. According to Rebecca, things got pretty bad over there. How bad? She's talking about separation, Mom. She said the trip brought a lot of issues to the surface that she can't ignore anymore. The news hit me hard. As angry as I was with Brian, I never wanted to see his marriage fail. This isn't your fault, Heather said firmly, reading my expression. Brian's actions have consequences beyond just his relationship with you. Rebecca deserves a partner who's honest with her. The day before my surgery, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I found Rebecca standing on my porch looking nervous. Rebecca, I said, surprised. Please come in. She stepped inside hesitantly. I wanted to see you before your surgery tomorrow. Heather told me the date. We sat in the living room, an awkward silence stretching between us until Rebecca finally spoke. I owe you an apology, Eleanor. I should have questioned where the money for that trip was coming from. Deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Brian and I make good money, but not luxury villa in the Maldives for 6 people money. You trusted your husband, I said gently. That's not a crime. It's not the first time, she admitted, staring down at her hands. There have been other incidents. Smaller ones. A credit card I didn't know about. A loan from his friend. I looked the other way because it was easier than confronting the pattern. What will you do now? I asked. I've asked Brian to move out temporarily. I told him we can work on our marriage, but only if he gets help for his financial issues and makes amends for the harm he's caused. Starting with you. And how did he respond to that? Rebecca smiled sadly. Not well at first. He's still insisting you overreacted, that it was a misunderstanding. But I think reality is starting to sink in now that his lawyer has told him he has no case against you. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. This isn't from Brian. It's from me. It's not much, but it's a start toward repaying what he took from you. I pushed the envelope back toward her. Keep it, Rebecca. Use it for the children. Please, she insisted. It would mean a lot to me. To refuse would have dishonored her attempt to make things right, so I accepted the envelope with a thank you. After Rebecca left, I sat thinking about how situations like these revealed people's true characters. Rebecca had shown integrity by coming to apologize and offer restitution. Brian, on the other hand, was still refusing to acknowledge the harm he had caused. My surgery the next day went smoothly. Dr. Kapoor reported that they had caught the deterioration just in time, and with proper physical therapy, I should regain significant mobility and experience much less pain. The recovery process was challenging, but rewarding as I worked with a dedicated physical therapist named Luis, who pushed me to regain strength and flexibility. Each small improvement felt like a victory, not just physically but emotionally as well. I was healing on multiple levels. 2 weeks into my recovery, Heather came by with surprising news. Brian asked about you, she said, helping me with my afternoon exercises. He wanted to know how the surgery went. What did you tell him? The truth. That you're recovering well, but that it's been difficult. That you could use his support. And he didn't say much. Just nodded. But I think he's starting to come around, Mom. Rebecca said he's been seeing a therapist. Apparently, there are some deeper issues at play with his relationship to money and success. A week later, I received a text from Brian. Heard you're doing well with PT. That's good. It wasn't much, but it was the first direct communication since the airport. I replied with a simple thank you. I hope you're doing well too. Small steps. Baby steps. But steps nonetheless. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon a month after my surgery, there was a knock at my door. I opened it with the help of my walker to find Brian standing there, looking uncomfortable but determined. Mom, he said, his voice rough. Can we talk? I let him in, and we sat across from each other in the living room. The space between us filled with unspoken words. I'm sorry, he finally said, the words seeming to physically pain him. What I did was wrong. I took your money without permission. I prioritized impressing Rebecca's parents over your health. And then I blamed you when you stood up for yourself. I listened silently, letting him continue. I've been seeing someone, a therapist. She's helping me understand some things about myself. About why I feel this constant need to appear successful, to spend money I don't have. It goes back to when Dad left, to feeling like I wasn't enough. Oh, Brian, I said softly. That's not an excuse, he quickly added. Just context. I'm responsible for my actions and I hurt you deeply. I broke your trust. I'm not asking for forgiveness right now. I know I need to earn that back. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on myself, trying to be better. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, maybe ever. We talked for hours that afternoon, addressing not just the theft but the patterns in our relationship that had contributed to it. My tendency to sacrifice everything for my children. His sense of entitlement. The unspoken expectations between us. Rebecca told me she came to see you, Brian said. That she tried to repay some of the money. She did. I want to repay all of it. I've set up a payment plan. It'll take time, but you'll get every penny back. I appreciate that. Before he left, Brian asked if he could come by the following week to help with some yard work I'd been neglecting during my recovery. It was a small gesture, but a meaningful one. A first step on the long road to rebuilding trust. My relationship with Brian remained fragile in the months that followed, but it was healing, much like my knee. There were setbacks and painful moments, but also progress and hope. Throughout this journey, I learned valuable lessons about setting boundaries, about the difference between loving someone and enabling them, about putting my own needs on the priority list. I learned that sometimes the hardest part of loving someone is holding them accountable for their actions, even when it hurts. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to change the dynamics in a relationship, to stand up for yourself, to put on your own oxygen mask first. If you've ever had to make the difficult choice between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Don't forget to like this video if you found my experience helpful, subscribe to hear more stories of family challenges and resilience, and share with someone who might be struggling to set healthy boundaries with loved ones. Remember, it's never too late to prioritize your own well-being. Thank you for listening and take care of yourselves out there.